It's day 2 of the season opener for the Ginetta Racing Championships in 2025 here from the Donington Park Grand Prix circuit. And if day 1 was anything to go by, we are in for a treat. We had one race apiece for all 3 of our Ginetta categories yesterday. Each one of them was full of entertainment, full of drama, and we had some particularly good racing from the drivers who are set to kick off our Sunday here, the Ginetta Junior stars, who certainly put on a show. Lots of new drivers, many of them making their car racing debuts, but you never would have known that based on the quality of the racing. It was really very clean, generally speaking, very close, as you would expect for Ginetta Juniors, and it all came down to a last lap shootout between Alfie Slater, Fred Green and Scott Lindblom, and it was Alfie Slater, the second-year driver for our racing, who was able to come home a race winner. But Fred and Scott, who chased him down, and indeed both had a stint in the lead at one point or another during that race, making their debuts in the championship, and were immediately on the pace, so that we're looking to try and each climb a step or two higher on the podium here this morning. Track temperature is about getting on for 10 degrees cooler, maybe more than that actually, than it was yesterday afternoon. Track temperature, I think, for their race yesterday was into the 20s, very much within single figures right now. It will warm up as the day goes on, but it's bright and early here at Donington, and it is there's a little bit of a chill in the air. The breeze that was blowing across the track yesterday afternoon is still sort of here as well. So similar, albeit slightly cooler conditions for the drivers to get to grips with, and a big crowd already starting to pour into Donington Park to enjoy this season opening weekend, not only for Ginetta, but also, of course, for the British GT Championship. A little bit later on today, Ginetta now into their 3rd season as sort of the primary support categories to British GT, and this year in particular, they pulled out all of the stops to put on a show with big grids and lots of changes within the Ginetta ranks heading into 2025 as well. The stars of the Ginetta Junior Championship then are led from the assembly area by the Ginetta pace car. They'll line up on the dummy grid, there'll be a green flag lap, and then we'll be away and racing for 20 minutes. Mentioned Alfie Slater, the winner yesterday. Well, there, look at that, they are pouring in. I, for once, wasn't being dramatic. That was absolutely the case, and that queue, I can tell you, stretches all the way up the main road, up towards Castle Donington. It is a very, very busy day anticipated here at Donington Park, and the Ginetta Junior race, hopefully most of those people you saw queuing will get in time to enjoy this race, because it's one not to be missed. So I mentioned the podium finishers: Alfie Slater, Fred Green, Scott Lindblom, the top 3. Behind them, there were several other thoroughly entertaining battles going on. Colin Cronin, Joseph Smith and Rocco Coronel were joined by Max Cuthbert to make a 4-way fight for the positions at the back end of the top 5. Rocco Coronel, son of, well, I was going to say former touring car driver. He's done a bit of everything though, hasn't he really, Tom Coronel? He is here this weekend, I believe, cheering on Rocco. But Rocco, the second of those Red Bull-backed R-Racing drivers, the first of those being Scott Lindblom, who starts on the front row. There he is, the that is Rocco, isn't it, who's qualified on the front row for this race. But Rocco Coronel had pace in race 1, just never quite seemed to be able to put himself in the right place at the right time to utilise that pace, and on more than one occasion found himself getting squeezed out of line. And in Ginetta Junior racing, especially around a high-speed track such as Donington Park, you can't afford to do that, because you will lose multiple positions, generally speaking, and that is what happened to Rocco on a few occasions. But he will this time be starting from the front row, because it's the second fastest lap times from qualifying yesterday, which set the grid for race number 2. So Alfie Slater, very familiar sight, having Alfie Slater at the front. He was the winner yesterday, although only started 3rd for that race, and cut his way through into the race lead over the first few laps. Rocco Coronel there alongside, and then Colin Cronin. So Colin Cronin for Elite Motorsport, the first of the non-R-Racing cars. And then another R-Racing driver, Scott Lindblom, will be starting from 4th. He was the podium finishing Red Bull Junior driver in yesterday's race. So a little bit of a delay, I think, maybe in releasing the cars onto the green flag lap. I think something was going on at the back of the field. There's Alfie Slater, your championship leader, of course, after that first race. He scored 35 points for winning a race in the Ginetta Junior Championship, 30 for 2nd and 26 for 3rd. So there are quite decent points differentials between the first few finishing positions, as should be the way, really. It does reward race winners. At the end of the season, the overall champion will receive a £20,000 credit from Ginetta and free entry into a 2026 Ginetta Championship of their choice, or they have the option of claiming the £50,000 scholarship towards moving up into the GB4 Championship for next year. Ginetta strengthening their ties with another of the major support categories for British GT here this weekend. GB4, another series which is very much growing steadily over the last couple of years. Their biggest ever grid on track this weekend. And we may well be seeing, should they elect to go down the single-seater route, our 2025 Ginetta Junior Champion on that grid next year. So the car's then released onto the green flag lap, and an opportunity for the drivers to get a bit of a sense of how the track conditions have changed since yesterday. Whilst they do that, let's take a look at how they will line up in full then for this second race of the weekend. Alfie Slater and Rocco Coronel, as I'd mentioned, will share the front row of the grid. Colin Cronin for Elite Motorsport has Scott Lindblom for company on row 2. Then Fred Green. So Fred Green second in yesterday's race, only 5th on the grid for this one with some work to do. He shares row 3 with Torrin Byrne. Max Cuthbert and Joseph Smith are together on row 4. And then South African driver Ethan Lennon on the 5th row of the grid alongside Ethan Carney. Ethan Lennon was just inside the top 10 yesterday. Carney, though, had to make a pit stop for bodywork repairs. Jarrett Clark and Felix Livesey are together on row 6. Then George Proudfoot-Nalder, who was in the thick of the midfield battles yesterday, has Emilio Del Grosso for company on row 7. Row 8, Felipe Reich and Reevy Lake. Reevy Lake brought out a safety car after an excursion into the gravel trap yesterday. Then on the 9th row, Harry Bartle and Josh Watt. Harry, one of the many rookie drivers who, of course, have a class of their own to compete for as well over the course of the season. Henry Cameron and Raul Zanzara, the Spaniards, are at the back of the top 20. Then, the first of the Mabundas, it's Diso Mabunda and Mallory Mabunda actually together on that 11th row of the grid. The siblings, then Noah Young and Matthew Chihuahua. Tim Gray Motorsports team represented there on the 12th row. 13th row for Joshua Henry and Katrina A. And Freddie Lloyd will bring up the rear. And Freddie Lloyd inside the top 10 yesterday, but his second fastest lap time in qualifying, well, he didn't set a second fastest lap time, sadly. That's why he's at the back. Onboard footage for you, courtesy of, amongst others, Rocco Coronel, who starts from the front row of the grid in one of those Red Bull liveried R-Racing cars. And we also have one on board of Ethan Carney. Now, the view from this car was rather obscured yesterday when the American had a bit of contact with a marker post down at the old hairpin. It somehow dislodged the bonnet of the car, and it was flapping up across his windscreen for much of the race before eventually he had to dive for the pit lane. Noah Young is our third and final onboard driver. He starts 23rd, so we've got a car at the very front of the field, a car in the middle of the pack, and a car that hopefully we'll see coming through from towards the rear. We've got all angles covered here this morning for what we're hoping will be a fairly entertaining second race of the season. So, up towards Goddard's corner, they will stream. I mentioned that there is this separate rookie category. Well, they have their own championship as well, which obviously is being led by Fred Green after his class victory yesterday. £5,000 Ginetta credit will go their way, the winner of the rookie champion at the end of the year, and half-price entry into a Ginetta championship of their choice next season. So even if you are a rookie, you have something to fight for, although I think it's fair to say we're going to see some of the rookies fighting for the overall championship as well this year. It's always the way. There are always a handful of these rookie drivers who just seem to be able to jump into these cars, usually straight out of karting, and immediately be on the pace. There's the 67 car at the back, Freddie Lloyd. As I said, he's one to watch for because Freddie finished 9th yesterday, but because of track limits infringements, I believe, he only set one valid lap time in qualifying, so therefore his non-existent second fastest lap puts him right at the back of the field, but he has definitely got better pace than 27th and last on the grid would suggest. So, back of the grid is now more or less in position. The eyes of the drivers turn to the starting gantry. When those 10 red lights are extinguished, we'll be away and racing for the second time this weekend in the Ginetta Junior Championship. Lights out, off they go towards Redgate Corner. Pretty even start by the looks of it from the front row men. Fred Green's had a good start though, and he nips up the inside of Scott Lindblom. And actually Rocco Coronel, Lindblom's teammate, is on the outside of Alfie Slater into Redgate Corner and challenging for the race lead. Now he will have momentum on the outside line, but he might not be given a huge amount of space, so he sensibly, I think, ducks back in line behind the race leader. So grid order across the top three, still side by side for fourth between Green and Lindblom as they head through the crater curves on cold tyres for the first time at racing speed. They don't have a lot of grip as they turn through the left, then they pitch it right into the old hairpin. Still Lindblom is on the outside and finally has to give way to Fred Green, who breaks through into fourth position, and Fred will now try and chase off after the leaders. Someone going through the dirt further back, bounces back on the road. That was the number 20 20 car of Tisa Mabunda, who rejoins alongside Josh Watts in the all-black number 22. But again, major disaster averted there, despite that fairly wild bounce over the gravel. On the outside there, Ethan Carney, one of our onboard cars. He is trying to find a way past George Proudfoot-Nalder, who I think will prevail in that battle. Yes, he does. There you can see the black MDD prepared car just slotting in front of one of the fleet of Elite Motorsport stars. So Ethan Carney tucks into the slipstream, heads down the exhibition straight, and will try and maybe figure out a way of making a move into the hairpin. The leaders are already through the chicane though and heading down towards the Melbourne Loop for the first time. Again, a remarkably clean opening lap, but a side-by-side further back. That's Josh Watts on the outside of the number 83. 83 is Reeve Lake, as a big defensive move sort of clogs up the middle of the top 10 here, down into the Melbourne hairpin. And Ethan Lennon, I think, was towards the front of that group then in the number 32 car. I think it was Torrin Byrne who was the one really throwing the block on everybody, but it was successful because Torrin is still there in 6th place as we approach the end of the opening lap. Another really good display of clean side-by-side racing from the stars of the Ginetta Junior Championship. There's a little bit of grass tracking going on off the final corner, but the race is led by a pair of our racing cars then. Alfie Slater, Rocco Coronel holding formation at the front of the field, then Cronin in 3rd place, and so Colin Cronin also holding his starting spot. The outside there is Proudfoot-Nalder, even more on the outside though. Who's that? That's the 32, isn't it, bouncing back on? And that was Ethan Lennon, who found himself going through the dirt at Redgate Corner and dropping a whole heap of positions as a result. Ooh, race leader in the gravel trap as well. They're all struggling, I think, on cold tyres here in the early stages. Now, I was about to say that these two ought to work together, really, and I think Rocco Coronel is trying to signal that to Alfie Slater there. You saw his right hand briefly come off the wheel. I think he was trying to gesticulate to the leader. Well, first of all, no more of that rally crossing, please, and also, let's work together, because they are getting away from Colin Cronin in 3rd position. Look at the armfuls of opposite lock as Rocco pitches the car into Coppice Corner. That is the quickest way to drive these cars, though. You don't want to be losing momentum by over-slowing the car on corner entry. So they sort of pitch it in sideways almost into the corner and then get on the gas as early as possible. I've had a change for 3rd. In fact, a lot of changes because Lindblom is 3rd, Green is 4th, and Torrin Byrne was briefly, I think, at the end of sector 2 up into 5th, although I think Colin Cronin managed to keep the number 18 car behind, but Cronin still loses 2 positions. And it's now an R Racing 1, 2, 3. Then we've got 2 Elite Motorsport cars. And then the Pace Performance, number 18 of Torrin Byrne, is indeed there in 6th position. A small gap back then to the next group of cars, which is led, I think, by the number 15 car still, which is Joseph Smith, the blue and black Elite car. They were the colours of Archie Clark last year. Archie now, of course, moving up into the Ginetta GT Championship for 2026. Leaders then across the line. What's that gap 2nd to 3rd? It is 1.2 seconds, the gap between Coronel and his teammate Lindblom in 3rd. So we'll watch that with interest to see whether or not Scott is able to bridge that gap. Again, wheels being dipped into the gravel trap slightly there on the exit of Redgate Corner. So Coronel then, I think for now, content to sit in the wheel tracks of Alfie Slater. That may well change if he is joined by his Red Bull-backed teammate behind. Bit of loose bodywork is that on the front of Cronin's car? Well, if it wasn't loose already, a gravelly excursion at the old hairpin will have loosened it further. Through goes Torrin Byrne. And Colin Cronin's race starting now to unravel, really, isn't it? He was in 3rd position by the end of the first lap, but halfway around lap 3, he's at the back end of the top half dozen, side-by-side behind as well, and a change for 7th. Cuthbert to the inside of Smith, and maybe bringing with him Livesey. I think he will. Felix Livesey to the inside into Coppice Corner. Felix started 12th, and that move was for 8th position, so 4 places gained already, and maybe a 5th coming soon, because Cuthbert is wide. Livesey nips to the inside of him, and to the inside of both of them will go Smith. They are 3 abreast down to the chicane. You really can't go 2 by 2 through here very easily. 3 wide is definitely a non-starter. Late on the brakes is Cuthbert. He gets into the corner first, and again they sorted out really mature racecraft there from these 3. And bear in mind, these are 3 drivers in their first ever weekend of car racing, and really showing maturity well beyond their years there. Right on board with Ethan Carney now, who's closed in on this group, the American driver. Another Elite Motorsport car. Oh, except he's losing a place now. That is, I think, George Proudfoot Nalder banging doors with him as they head towards Goddard's corner. Yes, it was the 25 car, which is on the outside line into Goddard's, but might just have the momentum off the corner to challenge. No, Carney will show him the edge of the road, and honestly, that's probably fair enough, he will say, because George was not leaving him an abundance of space exiting the Melbourne hairpin, and he repaid the favour coming out of the final turn. Leading to getting away now, actually, because Rocco Coronel, who you ride on board with, has just set the fastest lap of the race, 1:53.8, 3/10 quicker than the leader. Slipstream assisted, of course, but nonetheless, he is now the fastest man on the track, and it means he's 1.4 seconds ahead of Lindblom, his teammate. Bit of a twitch from the rear there of the leader's car. He's wide again. That's not the first time we've seen Alfie Slater do that at the Old Hairpin, and look at the effect that has. He loses all of that momentum up the hill. But Rocco Coronel elects not to pull out of the slipstream, gives him a bump draft, pushes Slater towards McLean's corner. The time to make the move is perhaps in another 10 minutes or so, not just yet. They turn towards Coppice corner. This time, noticeably less oversteer on corner entry because Coronel is now stuck running at the pace of Alfie Slater, his teammate, and isn't therefore driving at 100%. Again, latches onto the rear bumper of Slater, who feels no need to defend into the Fogarty S's. Here, there, the revs really settling as well, as Rocco was probably running part throttle down the straight. He's had a much better run through the chicane. And this will be a tad frustrating for Rocco. He, I think, feels that he's quicker than Slater right now, but he knows that if they engage in a side-by-side tussle, then the only people that will benefit are the cars behind. Down into bottom gear through the Melbourne hairpin. What a long first gear in these Ginetta G40 Juniors. And, oh dear, we've had dramas up at the top of the circuit. 11 is one in trouble. That's Henry Cameron. Can't see the number on the other car yet, but the other car that hasn't come through that sector is Josh Watts. And we're going safety car. The safety car is out just as Alfie Slater drifted a bit wide at the final corner, possibly because he'd seen the yellow flags and the safety car boards a little bit sooner than Rocco Coronel. But, well, that means that gap that was increasing between Coronel and Lindblom is increasing no more. It is going to come down to virtually nothing when we get the race restarted. And it will be battle rejoined between the three R-Racing teammates at the front of the field. So yes, Josh Watts is the other name that's plummeting down the timing tower, and the tracker confirms that his car is stuck up at Coppice corner. That's where those two have tangled. So 2 cars out of the race. That's a shame because we were hoping to have a non-safety car interrupted race. We're going to take a look at what we can see. There's a screeching of tyres, and the 2 cars deposited into the gravel. Oh, there's a 3rd car off as well. Now, who was that? We're on board with the 95 car. And to the right was that 83 Reevy Lake, possibly? Yes, I think it was, because Reevy lost 5 positions on that lap. So Reevy, who was in the gravel at McLean's, the preceding corner yesterday, has now gone off in race number 2 as well. Going to look there at the number 19 car. That's Maluri Mabunda, the Rab Sport entry. And we were supposed to have a 3rd South African driver in a Rab Sport car this weekend, Levive Sambudla. But we did not see that car out this weekend. Hopefully we'll see it a little bit later on. So Alfie Slater then, as we mentioned, brother of Freddie Slater, champion of this series a year ago. And the Slater family name continuing then to impress in national motor racing. And yes, Alfie Slater taking after brother, and we think father as well, who we believe may have raced in British GT back in the day. So it's a quick family. You find that often, don't you? And Alfie Slater jumping into Ginetta Juniors and immediately impressing. Alfie Slater in that number 27 R-Racing car, with a tough task ahead of him, though, as and when this race gets back underway. Alfie always is slightly depressing when you look at the commentators' information sheets for a junior championship. Born in April 2010 was Alfie Slater. Birthday in about 10 days or so. Not that long ago at all. And yes, the oracle of British GT racing, David Anderson, sat next to me, does confirm that Adrian Slater was indeed their father. He raced in Porsches and won the Silverstone 24 Hours in which year, David? 2007-ish. Mid to late noughties, let's say. Thank you, David. Yes, so it is a family name that is familiar to those of you who've been following national motorsport for a few decades now. and Alfie European kart racing background. And he says his career highlight was finishing second at the Le Mans World Finals. Well, he's already looking at bettering that now in his Ginetta Junior racing career with that win yesterday. There goes Josh Watts's car being hoiked out of the gravel trap. And Josh Watts, son of Danny Watts, so again another family name that will continue on, although Josh not having the best of fortune, it must be said, in this first weekend of the season in Ginetta Juniors. Had a couple of issues yesterday, I seem to recall, and an even bigger one. In fact, yes, he was a non-finisher yesterday too. On the final lap, his race came to an end. Well, he's not even quite made it to halfway this time. The good news about all of that, though, is that the car is almost completely out of harm's way. The former Fiesta Junior racer, Josh Watts, will be watching from the sidelines up at Coppice Corner, but within the next minute and a half or so, he should be watching cars at full speed again, because I anticipate a restart, hopefully this time by. Alfie Slater will be quite happy to be trundling around at close to pit lane speed here behind the Ginetta safety car, because every lap he spends behind that safety car is one lap less that he has to be looking in the mirrors and defending from his two teammates, who I think we're now going to see a bit of a different strategy from, particularly Rocco Coronel. I don't think Rocco is going to have the option now to sit behind Slater and work with him. I think he's going to have to go on the attack. It may be another teammate behind him in Scott Lindblom, but I think Scott is going to be keen to make a move here as well, especially because Slater and Coronel raced away from the rest of the pack on the initial start. They won't want to let that happen again, so could be a slightly different look now to this final third of the race. The safety car has pulled away, lights now extinguished, so we're going racing again this time, and already Alfie Slater is backing the field up. We're not even onto the Melbourne loop yet, so we're still quite some distance away from the restart. But will he decide to go early? He went quite early yesterday when we had a safety car, I seem to remember, coming out of the Melbourne hairpin. May well be choosing an even earlier launch strategy this time, on board with Ethan Carney. When you're further back in the pack, it's almost impossible to predict when you're going to have to hit that loud pedal, because once you get to about 4th or 5th in line, you can't even see the leaders. We can tell them, though, the leaders have gone, and Alfie Slater, before we get to the braking zone at the Melbourne hairpin, has accelerated away. Now, remember, you can't overtake before you've crossed the timing line. Doesn't matter where you are in the pack, or indeed how slowly the car in front is going. You have to wait until you've crossed the line. Although, if Alfie Slater were to drop in at the final corner, I suppose that would be a different matter. He hasn't done that, though. He's nailed the final turn and actually has a bit of a gap back now to Rocco Coronel in second place. The slipstream will very soon take care of that, but it does at least mean he doesn't really have to defend into Redgate Corner. It's a leading group of 5 accelerating towards Redgate then, as Colin Cronin continues what's been a bit of a disappointing race here now. He's defending unsuccessfully from his Elite Motorsport teammate Joseph Smith, who slips through on the inside at Redgate Corner. Another place lost for Cronin, and another gravelly moment for Ethan Lennon there, 2 wheels into the dirt, exiting Redgate Corner. Not the first time we've seen the 32 car doing that over the course of this race. So the leading 5 then, down at the old hairpin, Slater, Coronel, Lindblom, Green and Torrin Byrne, the top 5 positions. Place changing maybe further back. Yes, nice move up the inside of Ethan Carney, who goes gravel tracking, bounces back onto the road. That was the 32 car, actually, of Ethan Lennon getting past Carney into the top 10. So after his gravelly moment at Redgate, he was immediately on the attack, gains a place, and Carney ends up losing 4 out of all of that. So Ethan Carney won't be best pleased. He's out of the top 10 and has a lot of work to do if he wants to get back into it. Leading quintet of cars then, exit Coppice Corner, 5.5 minutes to go. And Alfie Slater so far not having to drive defensively at all, although Rocco Coronel is a lot closer now than he was at the restart. Now, where, if anywhere, is Coronel going to show his nose first? This will be telling, I think, the run down into the Melbourne hairpin, because Rocco is close enough if he wanted to that he could go on the attack. If he doesn't choose to, then that sends a clear message to Alfie Slater that he's working with him. No, he's up the inside, so Coronel goes for the lead this time, as I suspected would be the case, and there's contact between the teammates. Around they both go, Slater and Lindblom pointing the wrong way, and that was always the danger if a battle did break out between the R Racing cars. Careful on the rejoin there, Alfie. There was always a risk that it could go wrong, and just like that, there is only one R Racing car in the podium places, when 30 seconds or so ago they were locking out the top three. Lindblom has come out of that worse, it must be said, than Slater. Slater's rejoined, I think, still inside the top 10, but Lindblom is almost at the very back, and Rocco Coronel, laughing his socks off, sets the fastest lap of the race and inherits a 1.8 second lead. I say inherits, he made the move himself. This was the move. He went to the inside. Slater tried to leave him plenty of space, but I think that Lindblom thought that he was letting them both go through, and then the lines converged at the apex. Around they both went, and R Racing will not have enjoyed watching that from the pit lane one little bit. So where did they end up then? That is the question, I suppose. Well, Slater actually is further back than I thought. He's 15th position. That is him, I think, there with the green highlights in this pack led by Ethan Carney. Carney, out of all of that, inherited a couple of places that he'd lost earlier on in the lap, although now losing out to the charging Freddie Lloyd. Now, I said Freddie was one to watch, starting from the back of the grid, and he is continuing to move forward. That's 12th position now for the number 67 car. As right round the outside at McLean's goes Harry Bartle in the MKH Racing car. There's a bit of a squeeze behind him. On the inside comes Proudfoot Nalder. Oh, that's always a little bit dicey when they go three wide into Coppice, but they sorted it out. And Nalder gets ahead of, I think that was the number 5 of Emilio Del Grosso, who is one of the many elite motorsport drivers filling out that midfield pack. Hop and skip their way over the curbs. Accelerate down towards the Melbourne Loop, where it all unravelled for R Racing a lap ago. And in that group was indeed the 27 of Slater. In fact, Slater on the outside line, look in the background, trying to get past Ethan Carney. So there is the number 27 car. And, well, a lap ago, he was in the lead heading through that particular part of racetrack, and now he finds himself in 15th place, and not yet actually gaining any of that lost ground. He's going to try and do something about that, though, into Goddard with a late jink up the inside of Ethan Carney. That was a good move, that, from Alfie Slater. And Alfie then now sets off after his next potential victim. That will be Freddie Lloyd, won't it, the 67. So another quick driver, in fairness, just in front. They're going three abreast again, these three. Proudfoot Nalder on the outside this time. There is some door banging around. He goes right in front of the next pack of cars, and it's the luckless Ethan Carney who ends up coming out of that worse. He has to go through the gravel trap, and I think will just about dig his way back onto the road. But, well, George Proudfoot Nalder, he was on the outside, and I don't think he realised they were three abreast to his inside. Straight through a Pirelli banner goes Felix Livesey. He's pointing the wrong way as well, and another car in the gravel trap in the background. It's all gone a little bit crazy in the second half of race number 2 here at Donington Park, as marker posts go flying. That is Lindblom carving up the inside of the number 3 machine of Raul Zanzarem, and the number 20, which is one of the Mabundas, Tiso Mabunda. So 2 places, well, 4 places gained really in one corner, or 2 corners for Lindblom there, when you factor in the cars that were going rally crossing. Right, what's the order going to be at the end of the lap? We're going to be starting the final lap of the race next time by, mercifully, I think some people will be thinking, because it's the attrition rate has picked up significantly in race number 2. Through the chicane goes Cronin. Cronin's back into the top 5 now, although not for much longer, because up the inside of him is going Max Cuthbert. And Cuthbert has already cleared the elite driver before they hit the brakes into the Melbourne hairpin. Then it's the 32 of Ethan Lennon coming up to challenge. Alfie Slater, meanwhile, back on the attack to the inside into the Melbourne hairpin. Another place gain, this time at the expense of Noah Young. And I think Slater's done quite well, actually, to piece his way through all of that drama, because he was right behind the spinning car at Redgate Corner. That could easily have ended his race, and he would have then had to pick his way through a bit of a path of destruction down at the old hairpin as well. So he's maybe now back into the top 10. We'll double check that in a moment. Round the outside at Redgate Corner goes Torrin Byrne. Now this is for second place somehow. Torrin Byrne has found himself into the podium places. He's got Fred Green, the number 51 car, just ahead. So Fred, who finished second yesterday, back into P2 again as we begin the final lap of the race. And then it is the number 15 of Josh Smith for Elite Motorsport right behind. In fact, Torrin Byrne having to defend from Smith into the old hairpin. Now defensive line on the way in will mean he's wide and slow on the exit. exit, and so Smith has much more momentum heading up the hill. He's also got to the inside line by the time we get to McLean's, and he is going to breeze past Torrenburn, who will lose a podium place here, I suspect, but not the rookie class lead. He will still, the junior class lead, sorry, not the rookie class lead, the class for drivers who are not making their debut in the championship this season. And he's going to be beaten by 3 people who very much are, because through has gone Smith by the time they get up to the top of the hill at Coppice Corner. There is a chance, of course, that Torrenburn may be able to fight back as they approach the Fogarty S's, but Joshua Smith is not letting that happen. He's hugging the white line on driver's left. Now, this could compromise his run out of the chicane, possibly. He's gone in a car's width tighter. Oh, Torrenburn clips the tyre stack, but absolutely fires the number 18 car off the chicane, gets the inside line into Melbourne, and I think he's going to get back through into 3rd place. He's late on the brakes. He will get to the apex first, and as long as he parks the car on the inside line, there should be nowhere for Smith to go, although Smith did execute a decent attempt at a switchback there. Can't get the overlap, though, and Torrenburn now has to go defensive again into the final turn. It will be, though, a maiden victory in the championship for Rocco Coronel. He got the lead just before chaos erupted behind him, and he will be rewarded with race victory in round number 2 of the Ginetta Junior Championship. It is 2nd position for the 2nd time this weekend for Fred Green, and Torrenburn fights through into 3rd place. That's much better than the 10th place that Torren achieved yesterday. What of yesterday's winner, Alfie Slater? Well, he is going to come home inside the top 10, I think, in 9th position. Yes, couldn't quite find a way past Freddie Lloyd, who was the race's biggest mover, 27th on the grid to 8th by the flag. A fantastic drive that from Freddie Lloyd, more than making up for his lack of qualifying time yesterday. Lindblom, by the way, ended up 17th after his part in the tangle with his teammate Alfie Slater. But while Star Racing didn't have a lot to celebrate in that race, they can at least celebrate a race victory. Rocco Coronel, and let's not let it be said that he looked into that in any way, because he had made the move on his teammate into the Melbourne hairpin, and it was behind him, really, that it all started to go wrong. This was the Torrenburn move. Look at this, how close he gets to the tyre stack. It was a defensive run into the corner for Joshua Smith. That meant he was always going to be slow on the exit, and Torrenburn wanted to really carry the momentum through as best he could, and that's about as much contact as you'd want to be having with that tyre stack. It didn't do any major damage, and it didn't rob him of any momentum, because by the time they arrived down at the Melbourne hairpin, he had more or less completed the pass. Brilliant racing between those two, and that move netted Torrenburn 3rd place, which of course he'd lost half a lap earlier at the junior class victory as well for the non-rookie drivers. But it was 2 rookies who will be standing on the top 2 steps of the podium. Rocco Coronel, a race winner by 1.8 seconds in the end, which doesn't really do that race justice. It is R Racing celebrating a race win then for Rocco Coronel. Fred Green and Torrenburn joining him on the podium. Get back to that result screen in a moment or two. Joshua Smith there celebrating a class podium, I suppose. He might have missed out on the outright top 3, but still managed to come home 3rd of the rookies. So as the cars bail for the pit lane, let's have a look at the provisional results for race number 2 for the Ginetta Junior Championship. Rocco Coronel the winner, Fred Green 2nd, and Torrenburn in 3rd place. Then it was Joseph Smith and Ethan Lennon 4th and 5th, Smith completing the rookie podium. Max Cuthbert had a fighting drive to 6th ahead of Colin Cronin. Freddie Lloyd, Alfie Slater from the win yesterday and the lead for much of this race to 9th place after that tangle with his teammate. Noah Young completed the top 10. Emilio Del Grosso was 11th position in that one, ahead of Felipe Raich and Garrett Clark. Tiusa Mabunda was the best of the Ramsport drivers in 14th, ahead of Raul Zanzaran and Reedy Lake in 16th. Scott Lindblom, the man who tangled with Alfie Slater whilst they were debating a podium place, ends up 17th, ahead of Ethan Carney, Harry Bartle and Mallory Mabunda, completing the top 20. 21st, we had Joshua Henry ahead of Katrina A and Matthew Chihuahua. George Proudfoot-Nalder, the last runner on the lead lap, with Felix Livesey, Josh Watts and Henry Cameron failing to finish. Well, after a very entertaining opening race of the season, round 2 of the Ginetta Junior Championship was rather a more bruising affair. It started off well enough, though, for the R Racing Brigade. Alfie Slater and Rocco Coronel sharing the front row and playing very nicely for the first half of the race. Rocco had a go at going round the outside of Slater at Redgate, but decided better of that and slotted in behind his teammate, who was making 1 or 2 mistakes on cold tyres, but knew all along that he had the support of his Red Bull-backed teammate and the two of them making it clear they were going to work together, at least for the first part of the race. Then, though, there was a safety car that bunched everybody back together, and Scott Lindblom, the third R Racing car, moved into third place and rather started to complicate matters. Ethan Carney had a run through the gravel at the old hairpin. Rocco Coronel made his move for the lead at the Melbourne hairpin. Slater tried to slot in behind, but sadly the third R Racing car of Lindblom was there. Contact made, they both spun, and they both dropped right down the order. That rather triggered 5 minutes of chaos towards the end of the race. There was a spin for George Proudfoot-Nolder at Redgate. Ethan Carney did a really good job to avoid him, and also a really good job to dig his way out of the Redgate gravel trap. Then Felix Livesey was levered aside at the old hairpin, took down a Pirelli banner, and had a couple of loops onto the grass for good measure, including another one as he tried to get the car back going. All of this, though, going on some way behind Rocco Coronel, who claimed his maiden victory in the championship in the second round here at Donington Park.